Thank you, everyone, for having me. I'm excited to be here today. I have put together a PowerPoint presentation. It kind of gives an overview of the history of refugees coming to America, and then where we're currently at, the landscape specific to Washington State, too, as it's very different than the rest of the United States. And so make sure to save questions. There might be a lot that come up. I'll be sure to leave appropriate time at the end for any questions that you might have. Let me go ahead and share. All right. Um, so like I said, we're going to start with some terms just so everyone is on the same page on what we're talking about today. Let's see if I can get it going here. There we go. Okay, so a refugee under US law, a refugee is a person who is unable or unwilling to return to his or her home country because of persecution or a well-founded fear of persecution due to race, membership in a particular social group, political opinion, religion, or national origin. It's worth noting that refugees come to the United States with legal status. They come with green cards. They're able to work right away. Asylum seeker is a person who has left their country and is seeking protection from persecution and serious human rights violations in another country, but who hasn't yet been legally recognized as a refugee and is waiting to receive a decision on their asylum claim. An immigrant is a person living in a country other than that of his or her birth. And migrant is a person who moves to other places in search of work or better living conditions. So I just included some photos. This might be what you think of when you hear the word refugee. Some of the major refugee crises across the world, you'll probably notice in the right-hand corner, this is the Syrian refugee crisis, folks coming to Greece. In the left bottom two photos, we've got the Rohingya crisis and Burma, and a few other photos on top as well of crises in all across Africa as well. So for the purposes of this presentation, we're just going to focus on the history of refugees in America. Like I said, there's many crises and countries handle refugees in a lot of different ways. But for this presentation, we're just going to focus on the United States. So the first official legislation surrounding the refugee crisis was written in 1948, as you can imagine, following the end of World War II. So the US allowed more than 250,000 displaced Europeans into our country. And then the original legislation allowed for an additional 400,000 displaced Europeans in the coming years. It's worth noting that refugee policy today is pretty outdated and extremely underfunded by the federal government. Resources are scarce. I've included a bunch of resource links at the end of the presentation for you to go and read a little bit more. I don't have time today to go into refugee policy, but I've included some resources for you to read on your own time if you're interested. I kind of nerd out on this kind of stuff, so I could talk about it for a while. But a very, very high level process for refugees coming to the United States. So every year, the president sets the refugee cap for that year. This year, I think it's somewhere around 125,000 refugees that the US will allow into the United States. That changes based on who's the president. It changes year to year based on conflicts happening internationally. So it changes. This is the highest amount of refugees we've seen in quite a few years. But prior to refugees coming to the United States, they're officially recognized by the UNHCR. So folks end up having to leave their home country for a wide variety of reasons. And find themselves in a camp somewhere. So UNHCR recognizes them with an official refugee status. They undergo thorough background and health screenings. They have visa appointments in country prior to coming. And then once they're cleared to come to the United States, they arrive and begin what's called the official resettlement process. So currently, the process is 90-day resettlement period. During that 90 days, there's a lot that needs to get accomplished, and it's nearly impossible for all of that to happen in 90 days. Um, Things like finding housing right away, making sure that job placements are happening, applying for Social Security, making sure children are enrolled in school, getting access to ESL classes, are just a touch on a few of the big things that need to happen. There's a lot more that happen in that time too. Those are just a few of them. So the benefits that are available to refugees, this is really important. We'll talk about later on in the presentation, just some of the challenges for these varying communities, but a lot of the benefits that are available to refugees, as I mentioned earlier, is they are coming with official recognized legal status. They do come with green cards. They're available for all federal and state benefit programs. They're able to work right away. Apply for their work permits. They're eligible for federal cash assistance as well as refugee cash assistance for 3 months after arrival, as well as medical benefits. So we're going to transition now to talking about asylum seekers. So I just included some photos here. You probably are aware of what's happening at our southern border. Um, I should say too, our office in CTEC is really uniquely positioned to serve asylum seekers. We do have an official refugee resettlement office. It's in our Tacoma office, and so they work really closely with the federal government to officially resettle refugees. My position and what we do, we work really closely to help the asylum seekers, which is pretty unique. But I've included some photos here just of a lot of the really dangerous, treacherous journeys that asylum seekers make just to make it to North America. You're probably familiar with the Darien Gap, but if you're not, most folks that are coming arrive in Brazil and make their way across through the Darien Gap, which is this, I've highlighted it here in the map, this area in Panama. It's extremely dangerous, extremely treacherous. Thousands of people die trying to make the journey every year. It's an area of really dense jungle. Um, I attended a refugee seminar a year ago just on the Darien Gap. It's really fascinating. It's really sad. There's cartels, diseases, all sorts of things. But every asylum seeker that comes in through Brazil makes their way through the same passage. So there's various aid groups that are trying to get into the Darien Gap to provide services, but it can be really dangerous. And then this, I probably have seen photos on the news and heard about what's happening at our southern border, but just thought that I would include a photo as well. So the history of asylum in America, I say the real start of asylum law, it really happened tentatively before 2001, but drastically changed after 9/11, and the Department of Homeland Security was created. So DHS now is the umbrella organization for immigration and customs enforcement, as well as Border Patrol. Um, Asylum has always been a part of this country. However, in more recent years, it has become an increasingly debated topic, polarizing topic. You can gather that just from flipping on the news for 5 minutes. But according to the UN in 2022, a record 2.6 million new individual asylum applications were registered worldwide, with leading countries from Venezuela, Afghanistan, and Cuba. Um, there are currently 1.1 million pending asylum approvals in the US Immigration Court, and this is probably an underestimate. There's probably a lot more than this. Again, I've included a lot of links at the end of this if you want to go back and read a little bit more about that as well. So the asylum process further explained. So there's really five categories in which you can apply for asylum. Those categories are race, religion, nationality, political opinion, or participation in a particular social group. Those are the five grounds for asylum. If you're entering the country for a reason other than one of those five, unfortunately, you'll be denied on your asylum claim. There's three different ways to go about applying for asylum. There's affirmative, defensive, and expedited. Expedited is fairly new in recent years. It's an effort that the government is making to expedite cases due to the high backlog that we're seeing in the immigration court. Um, I am not an attorney. I work closely with attorneys who see asylum cases, and um, they yeah, there's just been a lot of effort around expediting cases because many cases, the current wait time for asylum hearings is around 4 years. Um, for those folks that are applying affirmatively, it means that you are coming to the United States with some sort of recognized protective status. So that could be in recent years, all of the Ukrainians, most, I should say, most all of the Ukrainians who are arriving are coming and they're given what's called humanitarian parolee. And so they have been given a temporary protected status and are allowed to legally reside in our country. Typically, parole lasts for a period of about 2 years. Um, and then they're able to extend their parole. The government keeps coming out with extensions for parole. We've seen that with folks from Afghanistan as well. So when OAR happened in 2021, Operations Allies Welcome, we saw obviously a huge influx of arrivals from Afghanistan. And so they were all on this temporary protected status as well, humanitarian parolee. Uh, and so by the time their parole ends, they need to have applied for asylum. And so there's been a lot of conversation I'm sure you've seen and heard about again in the news in the last year and last couple of months about finding a legal pathway for a lot of our Afghan neighbors. And so um, we have a team at our office of attorneys that are helping apply for asylum for our Afghan friends. And again, that would be an affirmative process because those folks entered the United States and are here on a legally recognized protective status. Um, a defensive asylum application would be if you come to the United States and enter illegally, not coming through a port of entry, you will be what's called in the defensive asylum application, or a defensive asylum procedure. You're given a notice to appear. So most folks coming across the southern border are applying defensively. They're given a notice to appear in an immigration court somewhere in the United States. Oftentimes, we'll see folks coming to Seattle who have notice to appear in other immigration courts across the country. A little bit more about that later on in the presentation as well. Something that you may or may not know about immigration court, but defendants in immigration court do not have the rights to a government appointed counsel. So that's another challenge. And then after asylum seekers apply for asylum, they have to wait 180 days to even apply for a work permit after submitting the asylum application. So there's a lot of challenges surrounding that as well. Some of the benefits that are available to asylum seekers is they are in Washington state. I should say a lot of this is unique to Washington state, but they're able to apply for food assistance. Starting in November of this last year, Washington state just rolled out a benefits plan for health insurance to be made available to everyone, regardless of immigration status. That wasn't the case over a year ago. We would have to try and help people who with complex medical needs apply for charity care with hospitals. It's a really big challenge for this population. to have high medical bills and no way to pay for them, no way to get insurance. That is changing in November, like I said. And then in July of this next year, so in a couple of months now, they're rolling out a free plan. So this November, folks are eligible to pay for health insurance, but in July it should be free to folks who are eligible, which is a really big deal. Again, after 180 days, you can apply for a work permit. Asylum seekers are typically not eligible for NGO programming due to immigration status. A little bit more on that. The federal government contracts with state agencies to provide services and programming to federally recognized legal statuses, and as asylum seekers are not that, a lot of times there's no benefits and programming due to their immigration status, which has been a limitation. That is changing, however, in this year, especially in Seattle and Washington State. And more to come on that. So some of the unique challenges for refugees is 90 days of resettlement services are not nearly enough to try and get everything set up, find housing, find jobs, make sure all of the things are being taken care of in 90 days. It's nearly impossible. That's the limitation, again, that the Office of Refugee Resettlement, or the federal government, has set. So we in our office are really uniquely positioned because we're able to help folks post the 90 days resettlement. And that's really where we see the majority of our clients, is people who just really haven't been able to accomplish what they needed to in 90 days. So there's challenges. Obviously, I just listed a few. There's numerous more, but challenges navigating the medical system, understanding when to go to the hospital versus when to go to urgent care versus when to go to primary care. What's the difference? Things that are confusing if you have lived your entire life in the United States, let alone trying to come and understand this in a matter of a couple of months. Cultural systems. English is a big barrier, finding affordable housing. There's increasingly been a push to move resettlement to Eastern Washington just due to the really, really high rates of housing costs in King County and South King County in particular. Every refugee coming has experienced trauma in some shape or form. And then again, obtaining jobs that pay a living wage is a big challenge. So unique challenges for asylum seekers. I put not working for a minimum of 8 months. I say that because most people, it's longer than 8 months, to be honest, that they aren't allowed to work by the time you can find an attorney or someone to help you apply for asylum. It's at least a few months, and then you've got to, again, wait that 180 days to even obtain a work permit. Most are currently homeless. You've seen a ton of this in the news, I'm sure, in Seattle. Again, we'll talk a little bit more about that. They'll end up on the streets just not being able to work, and there's no infrastructure to meet the amount of need we see coming for asylum seekers. Access to attorneys is a huge barrier. Most people can't afford to pay an attorney, so you're looking for low bono or free pro bono attorneys, which is just really limited. There's a lot of cultural nuances for a lot of these folks that are just challenging to understand. And again, every asylum seeker has experienced trauma in some way, shape, or form. And then English is a really big barrier. I will add to the English as well. With the amount of arrivals, we've seen ESL classes, Highline College, all of these places where we typically would send people for English learning are just completely maxed out. So we're trying to do our best in that as well. So you've probably seen a lot of this in the news over the recent months, but asylum seekers in Washington State, so LCSNW has been heavily involved with asylum seekers for really the last 10 years. We're one of the only agencies that has worked with this population. Um, so you've probably seen in December 2023, over 500 asylum seekers were living at Riverton Park United Methodist Church, just down the street from us in Tequila. Most were from Venezuela, Angola, and the Congo. Um, Beginning in January, the county and the state have become more involved. There's more funding opportunities that are being released, and there's actually a really big legislation that has just been passed that will free up a really large chunk of funding for nonprofits to be able to serve asylum seekers in particular, to help house folks that are living in the encampment. A lot of them have been transitioned to a hotel just down the street from our office in SeaTac, the DoubleTree, but a lot of them currently are living in tents on property. Something that's really amazing that has happened in this last year, and I've seen from nothing to this all come to fruition this last year, is there's been organized efforts to do asylum clinics by volunteer attorneys. Most of them are retired, which I think is absolutely amazing, but they're retired immigration attorneys that are volunteering their time to help folks that are living at Riverton apply for asylum. Which is a really big deal. So thousands of asylum seekers are flooding to Washington State. You probably are asking, how are they getting here? To be honest, we don't always know. Most are arriving by plane. Some are arriving by bus. All are pretty much coming through the southern border and somehow are ending up in Seattle. We know that these communities are really close knit, and so some are getting Pastor Jan from Riverton Park United Methodist. Some are arriving with her business card in their WhatsApp from people that are already living here. So, yeah, there's been a really large influx of people coming. So, what role does LCSNW play? We have a lot of different programs happening across the agency. I tried to include just the ones primarily that touch refugee and immigrants services. Our office provides wraparound case management services to folks. Like I said, we are able to serve asylum seekers. We've got almost 1,000 clients enrolled in our program. We've got about 10 case managers on staff that have full caseloads of clients. So we do everything from helping kids enroll, making sure that kids are enrolled in school, making sure that people understand the asylum process and what needs to happen. It's really confusing. It's confusing for us as it changes all the time, let alone people who English might not be their first language. So there's a lot of challenges there, but connect them with food resources in the area. We ourselves have a community resource center and we provide weekly food distribution on Thursdays. So we'll make sure to connect people with that resource as well. We do medical case management. This has historically been for a lot of our refugees that have been arriving, although, again, I think this will be shifting this year to provide more services to asylum seekers. But we help folks who are coming with complex medical issues navigate the medical system, make sure that they have rides to and from appointments. If they need to see a specialist, we help them with that. Those types of case management services. And then we also have been doing bi-weekly cultural orientation courses to really help our friends just understand some of the cultural nuances of life in America. So we do everything from understanding the school systems in the US. We do navigating housing, navigating the medical system, where you can go and how to write a resume, things like that, that are just, they've been really helpful for a lot of our clients. We do just general resource navigation, employment services, housing services, and then we also have a mental health team as well that serves a lot of our clients. So lastly, I just put a few things on. You might be feeling a little overwhelmed. It is really overwhelming, but I think sometimes we can get stuck in, oh my goodness, it gets overwhelming. But there are things that you can do. There's been a lot of advocacy work the last few years to allow asylum seekers to receive their work permits upon entry. And so that's something that you can absolutely continue to advocate for, is that when asylum seekers are coming, they can work right away. When you encounter refugees and migrants, be a welcoming presence. That's something that has been a really cool opportunity for me these last couple of years, is I've become more aware of who's around me and who my neighbors are. We have a youth mentorship program that we're always looking for volunteers for. We work with Ukrainian and Afghan youth in Auburn, Kent, and Fife School District. So we're always looking for volunteers in that way. Um, and then I would say to donate time and resources to the asylum seeker encampment at Riverton Park. They're always looking for donations. They're always looking for help organizing donations. So there's a lot of ways that you can get involved there as well. And then there's a really amazing program that some of you may have heard of, but the US last year rolled out a program called the Welcome Corps. And basically, Canada has been doing this for the last many, many years, but it's a way to do private sponsorship for refugees. So rather than going through official resettlement offices, you're able to get a group of 5 people together, and you essentially operate as the resettlement agency. So from the time the refugee arrives at the airport, you're picking them up from the airport, you're helping them find housing, find a job, enrolling their kids in school. It's a really amazing program. It's brand new. It's slowly starting to gain some traction, and we're starting to see a few arrivals through Welcome Corps as well. And then I've got some helpful links and resources here as well, for you to click through at the end of the presentation. That's all I have. I want to open it up for questions.